this is a live in-person meeting taking place in the public in accordance with the Sunshine Act. By attending and or commenting publicly in this meeting, you're consenting to the recording, retention, and future viewing of this meeting. Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Janelle Ressler.
Here.
Mary Brenneman. Here. Stephen Yerger.
Here.
Nick Lovell.
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We now recognize members of the public who have signed up to provide public comment as stipulated in Policy 903. When your name is called, please approach the podium and state your name, confirm you are a resident or taxpayer of the district, and topic of discussion for the record. Please direct your comments to the board as a whole, not to an individual. We ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. The privilege to speak may be interrupted, revoked, or recessed, and the meeting may be called by the chair if the speaker does not observe reasonable decorum and orderly conduct. Thank you. Suzanne Johnson.
My name is Suzanne Johnson, and as a district parent and taxpayer, I'm beyond frustrated by empty promises of transparency from this school board and administration. How are you turning the page on transparency with agendas like the one for tonight's Finance Committee, where you no longer make the business manager's presentation available to the public to review and provide comments for consideration on those agenda items? President Lovell and Vice President Ewan have the nerve to talk about integrity and transparency while they delayed their legal obligation to release the superintendent evaluation results that should have been posted in June, and I requested over a month ago. By email to the board on September 5th and in public comment on September 8th, I insisted that the board must not delay compliance with the PA Public Code of 1949, section 1073.1B1 that indicates, quote, upon completion of the annual performance assessment, the Board of School Directors shall post the date of the assessment and whether or not the district superintendent and assistant district superintendent have met the agreed to objective performance standards on the school district's publicly accessible internet website, end quote. Yet they didn't comply with the law until posting to the district's website 2 days ago, October 5th, from June 16th. The board had numerous executive sessions to discuss personnel. June 16th, the date of the superintendent's evaluation, June 19th, July 10th, July 21st, and September 2nd, which was the day that Mr. Moyer, Dr. Moyer, submitted his application for acting superintendent, which was the day before the vacancy was actually posted on the district's website, requesting those applications, which stayed up for 3.5 business days. Clearly, the superintendent resignation and resignation of 2 board members are related. The board majority pushing out the superintendent with a poor performance evaluation, and that being the last straw for 2 long-serving board members to resign. You cannot correct course and restore public confidence unless you act with the utmost integrity and transparency. And I'm not talking about aiming for the bare minimum that you think you can get away with. Regarding the update to the conflict of interest policy on tonight's agenda, it's unacceptable that the limit for board members' employees on accepting things of monetary value is $249. That's way too high. I believe a more appropriate nominal limit would be $25. That's something I've seen in lots of other government entities. Further, the policy should specify limiting occurrences to once per year from any given entity. As far as the chair for this committee, frankly, I'm surprised we haven't heard Mrs. Ewan tell us that while she has been on the board, they have never had the president chair a committee. Regardless of whether past practice is correct or not, she usually chimes in, such as when she admitted they always delete public records and board email accounts. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a better alternative to the president chairing this committee, at least until after the election and board reorganization, because certainly Ressler chairing this committee would be disastrous for our students, staff, and community. Finally, now that we've heard tonight's finance presentation, I must reiterate that as this administration and board look at capital projects and other spending this year, There needs to be more consideration on the impact of taxes, and some hard decisions need to be made about spending priorities. Last year, when discussing the annual capital projects, there were minimal cuts, such as delaying the purchase of the carpeting, which is back on the list. But this board, including Lovell, Ewan, Yerger, and both Brennemans, went on to approve $3.2 million transferring to capital reserves, large facility grant projects, and the design of an expensive athletic fields project. It's not fiscally responsible to continue to pass budgets with large deficits and approve expensive new spending initiatives and simply hope for windfalls. At the November 4th general election, voters need to demand change for what's best for our students, teachers, and taxpayers. It's beyond time to say no to Ewan, Yerger, and Ressler.
I won't get into all the inaccuracies, but I just want to state that the FP&S agenda was not completed by this committee, but that issue, with it not being linked, will be corrected moving forward. All right, Dr. Merriman.
So good evening. This committee had asked for some updates on where we are academically and some of our action steps. So this evening we're going to go through some things that we are working on here in the district. I was going to say, I think that's the last slide.
I think I clicked through it earlier just to make sure I had it.
All right, there. So in keeping with the district vision to build a solid foundation to prepare all students for life and career success, that is the vision that was adopted by the comprehensive plan and then approved by the school board back sometime last winter, early spring. So I took the word from that, from foundation, and Carrie, if you want to advance the slide, and okay. I took the word from that as far as foundation, and what are we doing here foundationally to help us move forward academically? And so the top 5 bullet points that I took from that is developing a deeper understanding of our PA state standards and what the eligible content is. And so the eligible content is for any subject level that is state tested. So 3 through 8 for PSSAs, and then your algebra, keystone, and bio. That's your eligible content that kids will see in testing. And then also having a deeper understanding of how lesson planning, instruction materials, formative and summative assessments all have to be aligned in order for students to be able to master those eligible content or PA standards. And then when we get that data, what do we do with that data? And then what type of professional development do we need, or any other types of training is also as a foundation. And then something else that was identified in the comp plan was attendance, which has been an issue nationwide chronically since COVID, but it is starting to take a turn for the better. But taking a look at how attendance impacts academics, because if you're not here, it's hard to master these things. So then I took these 5 foundational pieces that we're working with and then tease them out a little bit further for the committee to take a look at. So we talked a lot last year. Each voting level was trained by a member of PDE. They came in, they had them go through all of their standards, what their eligible content is, how to look for the anchors that need to be taught and how they will be assessed. So like those released items that we get every year from the state for PSSAs and keystones. So it really helps us use the same language that the standards are, that we should be teaching in, and how we are assessing kids. So it all aligns from the first day of school to the last day of school. And then the eligible content really gets into that really specific, discrete description and the skills that kids need to know and be able to do. So every teacher has been through this training. We keep it in front of them. Like we have our first in-service day, well, other than the beginning of the school year. Our in-service day is Monday. So the teachers that are going to be working on curriculum will be back into the standards aligned system through PDE to make sure as they're going through their phase of where they're at in curriculum writing that everything is being aligned so that's, you know, a piece of the foundation. Carrie, if you want to go forward. And I am going to cheat a little bit and make sure I'm hitting my notes so that I'm not leaving anything out. One of the other areas that we really focused on as an admin team this summer is lesson plan expectations. So while we have a lesson plan policy, it is it's not detailed as to what each building level. It was really up to the principal of each building according to our policy. And I said, I think we need something more uniform, very consistent, K to 12. What are we asking our teachers to do in order to plan for our students? And so I did put a handout at your place, because this is like the outline of it. And so at each of your place, it has the LASD lesson plan expectations, and this is in every teacher handbook. But it just goes into more details, more specifics, so that you can read through that and see, like, when we say standards, like, what are we talking about? If we are talking about the learning target, you know, it's really in student-friendly language. So at the end of the lesson, they can say, I can do X, or I know Y. So it's really that students know, it's posted, it's referred to, students know what to expect every day during the lessons. And then it just goes down through, we talked a little bit last year about vocabulary and how important vocabulary is. We can't call something one thing in our instructions and then put it on a test and call it something else and expect kids to know that that means the same thing. So being very deliberate in our vocabulary, and I'm not talking about vocabulary lists, that's not what I'm talking about, academic vocabulary. And then really taking a look at our instructional practices, and we'll get into some of that on a later slide, but making sure that we're activating all the students' prior knowledge as we get into the lessons, like what do they know, what misconceptions have to be addressed, getting into the core instruction, and then differentiating where we need to for students who need enrichment or any type of intervention. And you know, a lot of the research tells us, and when we dig into it, and I'm going to do a little reading here, so forgive me, when teachers engage in deliberate planning, establishing clear learning goals, sequencing their instruction, preparing meaningful activities, students will demonstrate higher levels of achievement. Intentional planning allows teachers to anticipate student needs, differentiate effectively, and provide structured opportunities for all students to have success. And I will tell you, like, one of the commitments that I got from the principals as we were starting these lesson plan expectations this year is that they are very diligent in making sure they're reviewing these, that it's not just a compliance piece, like they're not just turning something in so that it's compliant. They're turning it in so that we know that we're meeting the needs of every kid in our classroom, the kids that are sitting in front of them every day. So that was very deliberate of making sure K to 12 we had the same expectations going forward with instruction. So the other thing we take a look at, and either in the November or the December, depends on when all the final data comes in from the state, we'll have our annual data update from me. But these are our big pieces of data that we look at every year. So you know about iReady because we have talked about that in this committee. We've presented on that, and we'll have the beginning of the year data for you when we do the data presentation. We use that for differentiation. It puts them on an individual pathway that they can get on, and they'll like reduce skill deficits or knowledge deficits. Firefly is new this year. It is, it's put out through DRC, which is our testing site through the state, and it's the same system we use for our CDTs, PSSAs, Keystone, so it's all in one system. But Firefly is new. It was new last year as a pilot. We're bringing it on this year, especially with science. So grades 5 and 8. 5th grade took it today. Yes, 5th grade took it today, and 8th grade will be taking it tomorrow. And with the STEELS curriculum being so new, this data is going to let us know where our students are at in learning the STEELS curriculum, where we might still have some gaps, if we're missing anything in our curriculum. So this first benchmark, we're really excited to get in and dig into the data so that we can really make sure we're aligned, and that we don't have gaps in that. The CDT is used at the high school, and this is more of a diagnostic, kind of like your iReady. It shows where the learning gaps are in those 3 areas. So algebra and English have already taken their first CDT this year. The teachers take a look at that. They share that data with the kids. The kids know where their learning gaps are, and then they work throughout the first half of the year to minimize those learning gaps, push the kids further that need the enrichment. They take another one in the middle of the year, December, January, and then they will take another one about 1 month before Keystones, and then really individualize that instruction for the kids to narrow down those skill gaps. And then part of our standard operating procedures is formative and summative assessments. Formative assessment is every day, every lesson, every kid. So that we are checking for their understanding, like we're not going like 3 lessons deep, 4 days later, trying to figure out if they've learned what they're supposed to be learning, so that we can do quick reteaching. It can be anywhere from, I did walkthroughs today in 1st grade. If you ever need a spirit lift, go visit 1st grade. But a really quick formative, so they were doing some letter sounds. And the teacher said 2 words and said, now if these 2 words start with the same sound, give me a thumbs up. If they don't start with the same sounds, give me a thumbs down. Now that might seem very elementary, but that is a very quick formative assessment where if a kid's doing the wrong thumbs up or the wrong thumbs down, she can quickly address the mislearning that's happening there. So that's just a very, I mean, we do that at the high school too, but I'm just saying, like, that's a very quick formative. But then it also goes up to your quizzes, where you're doing those quizzes in between before you get to the summative assessment. And your summative would be your end of the unit, your typical like chapter end of the unit on like linear equations or life cycles or whatever. So your normal end of the unit assessments. And then of course our cumulative at the end of the year being our PSSAs and our Keystones. So then what do we do with all this data? So then we have meetings, and this is just a sampling. This is not by any means, because I could show you a whole protocol on data meetings, but there are a number of questions when you get this data, like what do you do with it? Like, it's great to have all this data, but if you don't know what you're doing with it, it's meaningless. So you pull that together and you start asking yourself sampling questions like this, like what are the trends it's showing us? What do we notice? What are some action steps are we going to take because of this data? Does this group of students need enrichment? Does this group of students need some reteaching or a greater intervention, like a tier 2 or a tier 3 that we've talked about? We really take a look at that open-ended, like are we having our kids really write to the prompts that we're asking them? Can they cite evidence? Can they analyze text messages, or not text messages? Can they analyze text features? All of those types of things. So by all means, this is not an exhaustive list of what teachers ask themselves when they're looking at data. It's just a sampling of when you have 2 6th grade teachers who teach math come together and they just gave a summative assessment, or they're looking at their Keystone data. These are some of the questions they would ask themselves. So of course we have data meetings after iReady data comes in. After we get CDT, we'll have some for the Fireflies. And then of course when we get our PSSA and our Keystone, the principals and I meet over the summer to go over that data. Then we go over it with our teacher leaders, and then it goes out to the buildings when they come back to school and they start digging into those. We just had another set of data points released as far as individual kids and what their growth was, because there's a different calculation for growth. What you guys typically see on PSSAs are achievement. The state actually gives us 2 points on that. So that data was just released. Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I got that on Friday. PBOS?
That's
Thursday or Friday? PBOS came out, so I spent some time on that this weekend, looking at the growth of our students and seeing where that's at. So our teachers, part of their time on Monday will also be digging into the PBOS, and it's nice because they can see how their kids last year did. But the state last year updated the system, and Carrie has helped with this because it's a PIMS upload that we do. Teachers can now see the kids' data that's sitting in front of them. And before, we would have to pull it for them, get it to them, and they would have to tease through it. And I know I'm like talking like abstract here, but now it's actually in a system where if you had a set of 25 kids this year, you can actually see all of their data, where before we would have to pull it out, print it, and give it to you. So it's been a huge update to that system. So for professional development, we are working on the structured literacy piece, the science of reading. So last couple years, K to 3 had that letters training. This year we are focused on any new teachers, also new teachers in elementary, grades 3 to 5, and learning support K to 12 are all working through the structured literacy. We had a training with our middle school on some instructional practices with their math curriculum with the Amplify, which is grades 6 through 8, making sure that they really understand all the intricacies of that program and the instructional practices that go with it. Really looking at explicit teaching and inquiry as a balance. There's sometimes when, kind of like with the science of reading, where explicit teaching in math is needed, and then there's other times where you can, once they have that accuracy and fluency, that you can give them some inquiry-based things so that they can use new, like novice problems to try to figure out on their own before you go further into the instruction. Really working on math fluency. I know I've said this a couple of times now tonight, but really that small group differentiation and not just teaching to the middle of the whole class, but making sure we're getting every kid in the classroom. And then we also have a team of teachers right now who are going out to get trained. So our math coach, Amy Bennett at the elementary school, Steph Zeitler, and Teresa Coons, who is new to us this year, but comes to us with a lot of experience, are getting trained in this concrete representational abstract, which is a sequential way to teach math and makes it like more accessible to all kids as they're learning the math. It's more like evidence-based practices. And then we continue on with our skills. So we have Brett Powell, Mr. Powell, who will continue to work with all of our teams in the implementation instruction of STEELS. And one other thing that we're working on this year is Mr. Peckhart from the high school has also been working with our 5th grade ELA teachers, getting them really digging into their PSSA data and some of those released items and helping them do some redesign there. So that's been really beneficial. And then the last thing that we are focused on this year is really the attendance and knowing that it impacts academics, making sure that we're looking at the trends. So I'll tell you a trend that Carrie and I noticed already this year because we were pulling some attendance data is the Friday of Labor Day. Our attendance rate is really high, and I use that as foreshadowing when the calendar comes on the calendar in November. So like we look at those kind of things, like what are our trends telling us of when kids are here and when they're not here? Are we getting letters home in a timely manner or phone calls to parents when we start to see a kid has missed 2 days or 3 days? Are we getting those phone calls out, doing those check-ins? Are we making sure that when we do have the kids, that the teachers and the admin, John, I'll point to him because he's here every day with our kids, like are we building those relationships? Again, go to 1st grade. If you're in there enough, you get hugs, anywhere in the elementary actually. Recognize and reward students for their attendance. That was something we used to do here, I think during we do need them here. So like when they are up to it and they are feeling well, and you know, we really need them to be in school. We're working on honing. We have some of this in place, but we're still working on making sure it does everything for us that we need it to. Is an early warning system through a system that we already have through Sapphire, which you guys know as parents, having the parent portal, and if you as a student had that. So there's a system in there where we can pull reports to track attendance, and it will show us who the high-risk kids are. It easily pulls reports for us, so making sure we're really using that. And then Carrie has done a nice job of this. We talked with principals as well, making sure that every building K-12 is consistent on how we're reporting attendance, because that wasn't necessarily happening. So Carrie's work with the secretarial staff, my work with the principals, we've really tried to work to make sure that's aligned and that it's accurate. Next one. Nick, I almost put my famous quote in here for you, but I'm like, I'm going to do something different. I always tell Nick Rome wasn't built in a day. So success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. And so like we keep making incremental changes, implementing action steps to get us where we need to be. And while some of them may seem small, some of them are larger, we are making efforts to get there. And we will see some success when I pull the data out here in November. Again, we have improvements to make, but we are definitely heading in the right direction. And that ends the presentation. I said a lot, fast.
Chairman Lavelle, may I make just a couple of remarks?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
And I'll excuse the pronunciation. Level.
My apologies. First of all, I want to, this is the kind of stuff that gets me really excited, because I realize the potential impact that it has on our students here in Littlestown. And I want to commend Dr. Berryman for her leadership in this regard. This lesson design and the expectations that we have for our staff, there is a real strong research base behind these strategies, and that excites me. There are high impact strategies that see a quick turnaround, which I really like. The thing I like the most about what I'm hearing are the degree of formative assessments and the benchmarks that are being done along the way. So many schools, that, in my experience, as Dr. Berryman mentioned, we have a lot of data, but a lot of schools are information rich, but well, they're data rich, but information poor. And what I mean by that is, how do we turn that data around to take actionable steps? How do we adjust instruction during the year, not after the year's over? One of my heroes in education, Rick DeFore, he used the analogy of formative assessments to summative assessments as a physical to an autopsy. We want to do physicals, and we want to make changes along the way, along the school year. And by these benchmark assessments and all those other strategies up there that give us information early on, we can adjust instruction to meet the needs of our kids. And that's what I'm especially excited about, those actionable steps. So this certainly doesn't guarantee that we're going to see a lot of improvement in student achievement overnight, but I do think this framework is a formula over the long term that we are incrementally going to improve our student achievement and so on. So thank you. And finally, I will just say this. I'm a big believer in the Pennsylvania value-added assessments, the PBOS. That really measures growth, and that's